What a world, you now listening to Talka Brothas podcast.
Welcome to the Talka Brothas podcast.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Talka Brothas podcast.
Talka Brothas.
Talka Brothas.
Talka Brothas podcast with Smash and Go D.
Go D and Smash, you guys doing your
The
thing.
mic is contacted, I attract clientele.
My brothers.
Go D and Smash, Talka Brothas.
That's poppin'. We ain't worried about nothing.
Y'all are now listening to Talka Brothas podcast.
What's happening, everybody? It's your boy Go D.
And that's your boy Smash coming at you.
I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Talka Brothas podcast. First of all, Smash, let's apologize to the listeners and the viewers because we've been MIA for a minute, and that's only because partially I'm going to blame it on you, but I'm going to partially blame it on me, but more on you.
Yeah, man, been moving. So, man, once you move, you find one thing, but you can't find the other. So it was just like, man, let me get settled first.
So you made the move, you're all settled in, you ready to take this thing to another level, I take it.
Yeah, we got to, man. We got to move on. You know what I'm saying? Sky's the limit.
There you go. So how was the transition? Was it good, bad, ugly, or was it the worst ever? Or how was it?
Out of all the moves I had so far, this has been the most difficult one because we were waiting for a house to get built, and it's so many changes and inconsistencies with that just frustrates you to no end. Like closing date is this date, then they move it, then it's this date, then they move it again. It's just ridiculous.
You was a nomad for a minute, man. I was like, it was to the point where the listeners, he was frustrated at all of us, and he was like, call back later, man. I'm apologize. We was like, we understand, bro. We understand. We know it's not personal. Man. We know it's just frustrated trying to get that move done. But you're retired. You got your retirement beard going. You know, you got your rebellion going. I see you. You know, you have to
save it off. I'm gonna save it off.
When?
This week. I'm gonna save it off a little bit.
Yeah, all right. Stay tuned for this. I want to see this beard come off.
But keep the goatee, but the beard got it.
I feel you. Any golf?
Nah, man, I haven't golfed in a couple of months, man. My homeboy came down in probably May. Yeah, May. He came down May or first part of June, and we did a little golf, and he kicked my butt. So I got to get back out there. What about yourself?
I went to the driving range a couple times just to try to see what I can do with it. You know, me and that driver have a love-hate relationship, and it's more hate than love. So I went out there and knocked it around a little bit to see how that goes. But other than that, man, I hadn't really got a chance to get out. It's been really, really been too hot for me personally to get out there. So, and then, you know, with football season started, me coaching, and that's kind of eating up my time, you know.
Oh, yeah, you about to be busy.
Yeah, very busy. But on that note, for us coming back, we have a really, really good guest. Her name is Lauren Martin. She's a professor at LSU. I read an article in USA Today, I believe it was, and she said something that really took me aback. Because, you know, we always discuss the things about, you know, why the inequalities in blacks in sports happen and those different type of things. And she put it so eloquently that I was like, I didn't even think of it that way. And just to give you the quote of what she said, let me pull it up real quick. Got me fumbling and stumbling this morning. And so she said, we tend to center whiteness. We don't necessarily think about how the rules that we might implement impact other groups because we're thinking about whiteness and white people being the norm. And I was like, for me, that was very impactful for me because I didn't think of it in that way. And that really kind of put it in perspective of how we think about it. But yeah, so for going forward, I was like, okay, I really need to get a chance to have a conversation with her. And I thank her, and I'm going to thank her as soon as we get her in the show. I want to thank her for the work that she's doing and the enlightenment that she's giving me. I don't know how impactful it was for you, but it was very impactful for me. But yeah, so Lauren Martin, long list of she's an author. She was born and raised in Nyack, New York. She's a former Division I volleyball player. She holds degrees from undergrad degree from Fordham, master degree from Buffalo. She got her PhD from Albany. She's a professor in humanities and social sciences and professor in departments of African and African American studies at the University of Louisiana State University. Go Tigers! You know how I feel about that. So let's bring Lauren on in and let's get this discussion going. How you doing, Lauren?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No doubt. So you're at LSU, and as you can see in my title of my name, Go D. I'm originally from Louisiana, big Tiger fan. You're a former volleyball player, so I take it that you're a big sports fan yourself.
Yes, I do enjoy sports, playing and watching and analyzing.
Definitely. And that's what got us here today. So tell us about yourself. What made you focus in your career, focus on actually going into because I remember talking to people and trying to figure out my career path when I was growing up. And I said, well, maybe sociology. And they were like, what you want to do, make a friend? So, but what made you focus on that particular part of studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had some really great mentors and really great teachers from high school through my graduate work that believed in me and saw a potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. So I took courses in sociology and African American studies at Fordham University and had professors like Dr. Mark Chapman and Dr. Mark Nason, who said to me, well, what are you doing after school? I think you have a lot of talent. And they connected me with Dr. Henry Lewis Taylor in Buffalo. So would you like to earn a free master's degree? Despite the cold weather, I was like, absolutely. So I went there and did that and worked for about a year before going to the PhD program. And I just knew that was my calling, that I wanted to do research, that I wanted to teach, and then I wanted to serve others. And so it worked out well for me.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was excited when Godie said we got you to come on the show because myself, I like I have a degree in social psychology. So when I saw all your background stuff, I was like, oh my goodness, like she gonna school me today. So I was all happy and excited to hear from it. And then I saw you mainly focus in the African American studies, which I was very curious about as well. And so I was excited. I got a lot of questions as well. So
wonderful.
I'm glad that you're on the show today.
Thank you.
So let's get into with the HBCU versus PWI debate being really hot right now, and looking at your background, you predominantly attended PWIs, and now you're at LSU. What made you? Do you feel any difference between students attending a PWI versus HBCU, and how does each can affect that prospective student differently?
Yeah, I think that students should go where they're supported. We started a motto after we became a Department of African American Studies at LSU, where we said that students should major where they matter. So I firmly believe that people should go to school, whether it's a HBCU or a PWI, they should go where they matter, where people are going to support them and are invested in their success. And as you mentioned, I didn't go to a HBCU, but I'm surrounded by people who have, including my nephews who went to Alabama A&M and my other nephew who graduated from Tuskegee. And they say wonderful things about their experiences and that they wouldn't change it for the world. And I don't doubt that. And I'm sure that special things happen at HBCUs that, Black students at PWIs don't necessarily experience. But I can also say that at LSU, that the Department of African American Studies, for example, and the professors there are really invested in the students. And we support the students with all the stuff that they have to endure being at a PWI, being in Baton Rouge, and being Black in America. So it's really about being supported regardless of where you are.
Right.
And see, and that was going to be one of my questions with you being at LSU predominantly, as a PWI, are there any challenges that you face when teaching African American studies?
Every day. Never a moment. I mean, it took a lot. Our program is a little over 25 years old. And think about that. Other places are, we're celebrating 50 years of having a Black Studies program. And here we were celebrating 25. And just this past year, we became the first Department of African American Studies in the state of Louisiana. It is 2021. We fought long and hard to try to get a required African American Studies course at LSU, and we got pushed back mainly from other faculty, not necessarily from students and from the general public. So yeah, we got it. We're built for it though, but it comes at us from many directions, and it's a daily fight.
Right. And how has the education for students of color that actually attend the PWI, how has this program helped them? Because a lot of times we come from predominantly African American social backgrounds. How does that help them in the transition of being able to fit in? Because I know it's like kind of an awkwardness for an African American student to actually attend the PWI. How has this program helped them in that transition?
Well, it's great when they know about us, right? So if they know about us, then they're taking our classes, they're connecting with us, and they realize immediately that not only do they have an advisor and someone that's going to support them for their time at LSU, but that they have a mentor for life. And so that's wonderful for people who know about us, who come into LSU with that knowledge. Unfortunately, there's some folks, by the time they're seniors, they say, I didn't even know that we had a Department of African American Studies. They're surprised to learn that there's an African American Cultural Center on campus. They will tell me that it wasn't included on the tour when they came as freshmen, and that they didn't find it until someone told them about it, and they wish they knew about it. So, for people who know we're out there and that we advocate on their behalf, they end up having a positive experience, and we're able to help them navigate any challenges that they might face. It's a little harder for those who are unaware of our existence, but through word of mouth, we're able to reach a lot of students.
Awesome.
I know, like in high school, because I played football in high school, but and I had to have an elective, of course, but I got to take an African Americans history class, and I was just blown away with the amount of stuff that came out. It actually was one of my favorite classes in high school, and I took a lot away with that. So from the class that you teach at LSU, what do you hope people take away from? What is one thing you hope people take away from your class?
Yeah, so I think it's important for people to be informed citizens that question everything. So I hope that our students will be critical thinkers, that they'll think analytically. They'll be the kind of friend that you hate going to the movies with or watching anything with, because they want to question everything. They want to analyze, why the American flag is placed in a particular scene in a movie, or why there seems to be this running theme of a white savior complex. Those are the kind of students that we try to produce, that are always asking questions and always seeking answers, and are really committed to positive changes, that they want to be change makers and to transform society and leave it in a better place than they found it.
Awesome.
So let's get to the point of why of your introduction to me. What I spoke about earlier about the quote that I took from the USA Today piece. Why do you think that hasn't been any change or shifting gears towards them, at least in sports, because we see now sports is in the forefront of trying to get to that equality level. Why do you think it was such a pushback this year with the Olympics?
Yeah, well, I think that one thing that we have to remember, and I know that you all understand this full well, but a lot of people in the general public still like to think about sports as apolitical and just a form of entertainment. And clearly it's not. Sports is a social institution, which means that it's impacted by all the isms that impact society more broadly. So if you have sexism in broader society, if you have racism in society, it's going to show up in sports. And so we shouldn't be surprised by that. People like Dr. Harry Edwards have been telling us about that for decades. And so it's once we understand that, then I think it makes sense when we see, issues like the soul cap with the controversy about whether these Black swimmers could wear swim caps that were designed specifically for their natural hair, and then to have, governing bodies overrule that. And just recognizing too the centrality of race in America. And so while, people thought that we had a great awakening after the killing of George Floyd, and we saw a lot of movement, history tells us, as Derek Bell has described, that we will see peaks of progress, that we will have those moments where we feel like we're making change, only to find out that we're going back to business as usual. So we have to find a way to break that cycle in the broader society, but also in sports.
So I think this leads into something that I saw while we were doing our research. You spoke on something about it was, and I wrote this down, so hopefully I didn't get it wrong. But politics of respectability and respectability of politics.
Yes.
So can you expound on that for us?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. So I was introduced to a book by Evelyn Higginbotham called Righteous Discontent. And one of the chapters, she talks about the politics of respectability. And so what she describes is the role of Black women in like the late 1880s through the 1920s, and their desire to control their images and to determine their own destinies. And these were largely Black women that were associated with the National Baptist Convention. And so they were fighting against lynching, for example. They were advocating for adequate housing. They were trying to make domestic servants a more respected and well-paid occupation. And again, trying to deal with stereotypes and myths about Black women in particular, but also looking at the entire Black community. Now, it wasn't as if they didn't have any issues. There were also class issues in that you had some middle-class Black women were trying to tell so-called lower-class Black women how they should behave in places they should go and places they should not go. But what I think is important and is often forgotten is that these Black women were really taking the lead on trying to control their own images and their own destinies, and they were committed to social justice issues that affected them as well as the broader Black community. Now we fast forward to respectability politics, and we're talking about things that annoy me, like signs on the front of a store that says, no sagging, or so you can't come into the store, things like that. Or when people try to tell younger people, especially, how to engage with law enforcement if they get pulled over, as if doing all those things will lead to an increased likelihood that you're going to make it home. And we know that, there are examples of people who have done everything, that law enforcement has told us we should do, that our parents have told us we should do, and still they've end up dying unnecessarily. And so people oftentimes use those terms interchangeably, and they don't mean the same thing. So I'm so glad you asked that question, and I hope that people will use more caution when they talk about the politics of respectability versus respectability politics.
Okay. So let's get down to the nitty gritty of this thing. So with the NIL rule, and me being a big LSU fan, I followed them exclusively more than I follow any other university. And LSU has been one of the schools that's been in the forefront of this NIL I situation. For me, my personal opinion, you talked about Ed O'Bannon on your TED Talk, and I have been a sore loser for years, right? Over my EA and my video game being taken away from me. Now, as a black man and a former athlete, I understand why, right? But I still was like, my selfish reasons, I still wanted it. But now that I see the NIL rules coming out, and I still think, for me, my opinion, I want to get your opinion on it. My opinion on it is that it's still not enough. I think it was just a handout to appease the masses versus actually doing what it needs to do. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that are making money off the backs of people that look like us. And it's to the point where it's a small token of, you can go out and get endorsements, but we still got to cut the pie with you equally for as much money as we make. Where are you now? We had that TED Talk 2 years ago. Where are you now? You was in the forefront of this. Where are you now? And how do you feel about NIL going forward right now?
Yeah, I think like everything else, when some folks don't want to change, it takes the intervention from the Supreme Court, for example, to make them to do the right thing. It's not that they see the humanity of Black athletes or college athletes in general. Here they fought tooth and nail not to have this happen. So it really does sometimes take judicial intervention to compel folks to do something that clearly they should be doing. I mean, this would not be tolerated in any other industry, as someone mentioned in the findings and opinion for the Austin case in particular. I mean, all of us, we wouldn't appreciate it if someone just decided to use our image and get a lot of money off of it and think that was okay and right. To try to explain it away. And so it shouldn't, college athletes shouldn't have to do that. And especially when we're talking about those sports like men's basketball and football, where Black men are overrepresented. And it's not a coincidence that that's where the resistance is. And the one thing that I want to note, and what I think is going to be interesting to watch, and again, to your question, no, I don't think it goes far enough, and that it's a step forward, but we have a long way to go. And I think it's just going to upset and restructure college sports for the next few years. But what I think is going to be interesting to watch too is that some people initially were commenting, saying things like, "Oh, it's going to be like the Wild Wild West." I don't even know what that really means, but I remember hearing that. But another thing to think about too, and we've seen this in the past with professional athletes, with like the values assessed to baseball cards, for example, and other trading cards, that sometimes someone who's not even really a great college athlete may end up getting a lot of money compared to someone who's has a stellar record, but because of their race and or their gender or how they identify or their sexuality, they might be disadvantaged when it comes to NIL. So there's so many different levels and layers to consider. And also, to your point, the member institutions still have a lot of power and authority where they can say, no, you can't do that, or no, we don't like that. And to tell some of the players in some instances how they can spend their money. Like, who does that? Like, you can't tell anyone else you can only use it for this purpose or that purpose. That's your money. You do what you want to do with it. So just the paternalism that continues in college athletics is a shame. But again, I'm sure that a lot of people never thought they'd see the day where NIL would even become a reality. But again, I just find it interesting that it wasn't because people think this is the right thing to do, but you have if Florida is going to pass a law saying that you can make money, how is Louisiana not going to do that? Because everybody's going to Florida. If you want to be competitive and you want to repeat the 2020 season, you got to keep up, whether you think it's the right thing to do or not. So,
did they? With them and how they implemented this thing at LSU, did they ask you any questions about how this plays in, or did they get any department help from other departments, or was this just an upper level type of situation on how they was going to implement this at your university and roll it out?
No, I would say that they at LSU, I know that they had outside entities to come in and provide education for administrators and the coaches on the landscape, what was being proposed and what you could and could not do. So they've been, as far as I have observed, doing a good job of just trying to educate people about the landscape and how it's changing and what we know and what we don't know. Now, I don't know the extent to which they're aware of my TED Talk and my
Right.
published research, but in my role as the faculty athletics representative, they're always quite transparent with me in terms of what they're doing to educate, the administrators and coaches and the college athletes.
Yeah, because you have, I would think I don't know if they realize how much of a great resource you are in that field of sports and equality as far as how this, because you called it, hold on, let me put this, this is, see how you put it. I don't want to misquote you.
Complex, the industrial.
There it is. You called it what did she call it, Smash? The industrial
college sports industrial
complex. That's what you called it. And we see that in society, but then you pegged it as in sports. And how does that play on the psyche of the college athlete that you noticed?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. When I was approached about being the faculty athletics representative, I was like, they're not going to pick me because I don't know if they've seen my TED Talk or they read my stuff. And so I was pretty surprised. But the fact that I became the rep, around the time of the killing of George Floyd worked out well, if you would, because I could help to lead some of those conversations about race and things of that nature. But I would say that, over the 8 years that I've been at LSU, that I have observed that many of the college athletes, they understand full well about this college industrial complex and their world in it. And so, I've had some college athletes who knew that they were just going to be around for a couple of years and they did their time and they were just nice and polite and stayed eligible. And as soon as it was time to go, they went. Or, others who were there for a year. And then, others recognize that they're not going to have that opportunity because less than 2% of college athletes actually go on to play professionally. And so they try to make the most of it and try to do paid internships and attend leadership seminars and look for employment or decide to go to graduate school. So I think that the athletes are well aware of the way in which the system is structured. And they also know, with social media that they may not be able to say everything that they want to say. And so whenever, different institutions talk about talking to college athletes to ask what they think, I suggest as a wait, no, don't talk to them. Talk to the folks that are in the professional league now, because they're free to tell you what they think and what the experience was. And so it's great when that happens.
So we talk a lot about sports and all that stuff, me and Go D. So, and I want to see if you can expound a little bit, because you said earlier, like, the NIL was a good thing and you'd like to see it go further. I would like to know how you like to see it go further, because I know Go D has a stance sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Go D, but he says like sometimes the athlete should just go to school for the sport, and then students should just go to school to be students. They should kind of separate the two instead of being a student athlete. And I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you all are familiar. I co-authored a book called Pay to Play. I think it came out in 2017. And so I tried to, answer some of these same questions, and not to say that I have all the answers, but I was imagining, a similar situation where maybe you have this relationship between, an elite college program and a professional team. And those college athletes are paid, their full market value, and it's not tied to some mythology about them being students at all. They want to play professionally. Maybe, you have different development leagues, but they're compensated the fair market value. Then you could also have, like, we had prior to all these big money contracts where you did actually have athletes who were paid and they played at a collegiate level, but it wasn't revenue generating. So you also have have that model. And, you know, and I think that, you know, combination of those things would be helpful. In the end, I just want to see that college athletes who are worth, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars or generating billions of dollars get some of that money, and they stop trying to tell them that, you know, if we pay your tuition, give you a place to live, and throw some, you know, sneakers your way, that you should be happy. That is not appropriate, and we have to do better.
Yeah, and I just look at the baseball model, and I look at the European model, and how baseball has a rule where you either go pro as a high schooler, which is great, or if you do attend a university, you have to stay within 3 years, and that gives the student athlete an option, right? Either I take this money and I go pro, and I can negotiate where they pay for my university down the line. You see people like J.R. Smith, who's going back to North Carolina A&T to play golf and get his degree, and then you have the European model where they are identify their best athletes, and they put them in training camps as youngsters, and that's their career field, right? And whether they bottom out or not, they still have a chance to develop what their passions are. Whereas athletes, we know their passion is really not academics. Their passion is playing the sport that they love. That that you said, that 2% of athletes who don't get a chance to go professional, they go professional in a lot of other things, but at least give them the option to choose, to make that choice. Because at the end of the day, it's their life, and they can choose how to run their life going forward. So that's just my stance on it. I really think that this was a farce. The NIL was a farce for them to cut the pie up. Just cut the pie up and pay the athletes accordingly. And I mean down the line. I mean all for the non-revenue generating sports. They all deserve a piece of the winnings, because at the end of the day, without those athletes, there would be no revenue source for them to even try to hold on to, you know.
Yeah, the issue about personal choice, I think, is really important. It shouldn't be understated. And so, you know, literally, the system that we have now is saying that if you want to play, you know, basketball professionally, you have to go to college. You know, of course, there might be other options, but for the most part, that's the route that you have to take. And similarly for the NFL, and it shouldn't be that way. You know, we might all say it's important to have a certain level of education, but your athletic career is not going to be but so long. So when people talk about, you know, folks should stay around to get a degree, I'm questioning what their motivations are. I'm like, let them go play, and then when they are finished, then they can come back and get a degree if they want to. We'll still be here, hopefully.
Right.
Colleges and universities will still be in business.
Because I heard you on your TED Talk, you said that the athletes have a limited amount of majors that they can take, and so that plays into my theory. Why is it there are limited majors that these athletes can actually put themselves into to get an education?
That was new to me.
Yeah, so I think that some institutions will say that that's not true, that, you know, athletes are free to select any degree program that they want. But the reality is that you have some degree programs, and I'll just use one as an example, like engineering, and they may have a very strict, you know, program of study where you have to take courses in a particular sequence. And then those courses may only be offered at certain times and in certain semesters. And so if you have all these demands placed upon you as a college athlete, and you have practice and you got film and you got obligations to the community, that might not work with your schedule. So in theory, yeah, I could say I want to major in engineering, but if it doesn't go along with my schedule as an athlete, I bet you I'm not going to be an engineering major. So you have those kinds of issues and challenges. And so when you look at the rosters and you see what the majors are, especially for athletes in high revenue generating sports, it's not a coincidence that you're going to start seeing some themes. And not to say that these are not, you know, rigorous degree programs, but it's not by happenstance that a lot of the college athletes might be in business administration and kinesiology and so forth. And as much as many college athletes, Black college athletes in particular, they really love African-American studies, they oftentimes cannot major or do not major in it because in many colleges of humanities and social sciences, you're required to take a language. And that's a challenge and a barrier, especially especially for some Black college athletes who are not interested in taking 4 semesters of Spanish or French or whatever else that you have. And again, trying to do that and maybe not being as prepared as some other folks and having to deal with all the demands of being a college athlete. So in theory, you might be able to major in a lot of things, but you also may have people in your ear saying what you should major in, and then there might be structural issues that prevent you from majoring in certain things.
Right. So I know, like sticking with this NIL, and we've been mostly talking about the male part of the sports, but as far as the females, because we know that they face a lot of disparity in everything, whether it's gym equipment, uniforms, whatever. They don't get the same amount of focus on them as the male counterparts do. Do you see the NIL or them being able to get paid for their likeness helping them get out there more, and is that better for them? Or
so I'm gonna say something that some people may not like and go find controversial, but that's what I do. I really think that we're going to see disparities where white women athletes, in particular college athletes, will fare better in selected sports than Black women athletes, for example. We already see that in some sports like women's gymnastics, for example, where a lot of Black women are doing great things, but they're among some of the most popular influencers on social media. Again, white women gymnasts, whereas you have a lot of Black women who are running track and playing women's basketball and in other sports that are doing great things. But again, ultimately, these are people who are business owners, corporate giants who may not look like, the diversity that is America. And so when they're looking at someone who they want to be the face of their company or their product, that may not be a Black woman's face. Right. Probably going to be more likely to be a white woman's face, or in some cases a white male face. But I think we're going to see differences based upon race and gender. That's my prediction. We'll see. We can come back in a couple of years and see if I'm right about that. But
I think you're going to be. I think you're going to be right. I think that it always, no matter how much we try to downplay race in all aspects of life in America, it always rears its ugly head, no matter what. There's the gymnast, I can't remember her name right now, at LSU. She has over 2.5 million followers, and she's one of the people that they're predicting to make as much money as she can possibly make off of her likeness because of her following on social media. Whereas you have someone that we tend to we're products of our society, right? And we tend to, like you say, like Miss Richardson that runs track. She made a mistake, and I think those type of things will hinder us because we are a product of our society. We tend to learn things that we're surrounded by a lot until we actually get to a PWI or get to a university and see how other people live and how they function. Do you think these type of things will always really rear its ugly head, or will at some point in time it will level the playing field and we will see some type of equality going forward?
So I'm sure you can predict what I'm about to say.
No.
That's right. I don't see it improving. And what's a shame, to your point about Richardson is that, and I've said this in other places, when it comes to Black people, we don't get the same kind of empathy and sympathy and forgiveness and redemption that some white professional and college athletes get. So there's that documentary about Jack Johnson, the first Black heavyweight boxing champion, called Unforgivable Blackness, and that really captures it. We might do something wrong, or it might even be questionable as to whether or not, it should be considered wrong or not. But because the person who's accused of doing it is Black, the way that people respond and the fact that they want you to be punished, and even when her suspension was finished, then that she couldn't be selected to be on the relay team. Now, I'm happy that Aaliyah Hobbs, who I think is a fabulous athlete, was able to be on that relay, and they won a gold medal nonetheless. But when it comes to some white athletes, when they do something wrong, people are like, oh, they served their time. So why can't they participate? Or they're, will say, well, of course they had a death in the family of a close family member. What do you expect? But we don't get that. Like Black people can't, they can't be in mourning. They can't grieve with a loved one. Like we're not human. And so it's just a terrible thing. And again, when Derek Bell, not only did he talk about peaks of progress, but he really talked about the subordination of Black people as being a permanent status. And just, really, he encouraged Black people to just find some power in the struggle, and that you don't stop fighting, but recognize that it's not going to change. And so you don't feel despair about that. You go in knowing that, but you still, show up for the fight every day.
Right. Wow. And go ahead, Smash.
No, I was just commenting on that because I was just like, wow, I didn't know it was like that. But I guess another thing I have too, kind of, because I took a class, I think it was sociology of sports or whatever, and in there they had a demographic that showed that even in athletics, Blacks in the health system don't get treated like the white counterparts. Is that any truth to that, or can you expound on that if you know anything about it?
Yeah, so well, in terms of just in the leadership in Black in athletics, I was surprised that there was a group called it's like the Black Association of Athletic Directors, and they had over 60 members. I was like, where have these people been? And I didn't even know that was a group, but I was glad to know that they existed. But I've also learned over the last year or so about the lack of mental health professionals within athletic departments, period, and how, there's only a couple for all of these teams, and they oftentimes only travel with the high revenue generating sports. And so that leaves, some of the other athletes quite vulnerable, and that there's an underrepresentation of non-white people in those positions. And so that has been raised as an issue. And I was just on a dissertation committee defense yesterday where Dr. Iffy Davis was talking about Black maternal health more broadly and about how Black mothers are treated. So it's a societal problem, and it's also a problem that we see in sports as well.
Right. Do you think? Oh, go ahead, Smash. Go ahead.
I was just real quick. Do any of the athletes at LSU come to you as you don't have to drop names, but as a mentor or guidance in seeking this type of help from you?
Well, not with regards to mental health. We have a fabulous staff that includes Dr. Lakeitha Poole. And so, they know that they can reach out to, her and her team. Okay. One of the ways that I'm able to support students directly beyond being the faculty athletics representative, I'm also one of the advisors for the Black Student Athlete Association, which was started after the killing of George Floyd. So we're trying to retool because some, the founders have graduated or transferred. You might know Nikki Vargas. She was the women's basketball coach. She's now the president of the Las Vegas women's basketball.
That's my team. That's my team.
Yeah, Coach Smith is the president there now. So we're retooling and trying to identify more advisors to support the Black Student Athlete Association. But yes, she was very central to their founding, to the unity walk that they did, and she was just a strong advocate for all college athletes, but Black college athletes in particular. And so that's one of the ways that I've supported Black college athletes at LSU directly over the last year or so.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's kind of, you kind of answered my question, is like with the disparity in health and different things like that, there needs to be more of us that looks like us, so that they can so that we can kind of educate them on how we are and how we operate and how the things that we need to be able to sustain within our sport or whatever industry that we partake in. So you answered that. So I think that I'm glad to hear that there are people that are in places of position of power to actually make those type of changes. That's awesome. So I know we take up a lot of your time here, but before we go, let's get something. What does what do you do for fun? What is this something that you do besides rile up the masses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I try to get a workout every day, just watching TV and playing with my phone on the treadmill, either at home or at Planet Fitness. When I'm not, working, I'm usually watching a Lifetime movie because it's mindless and I know how they're always going to end. Today, I'll probably spend most of the day watching reruns of The Golden Girls. So I'm stuck in the 80s and early 90s and so forth. So
yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's pretty much what I do.
So you're a New Yorker. And then what was the culture shock once you got down south? What was the biggest culture shock for you? Being slow, right?
So I tell people I'm a New Yorker for life. I still have my 518 cell phone number. I refuse to give it up for the 225, although I really appreciate the people of Baton Rouge and Louisiana. But I would say that there are some things that were not hard and other things that are a bit more challenging. Yeah, so having to have a conversation with everyone wherever you go before you can get what you want done was new for me. I will say that was the case. And then with the driving, because I'm used to driving in New York City when I was working at John Jay, and you just have to, be as aggressive as everyone else or you're never going to get anywhere. Whereas here, people let you in anytime. There's hardly any traffic lights on some roads, and you can go to an event and they can create a parking lot on a field of grass. It's how that stuff happens. But my parents were both from Mississippi, and I grew up in a Black church where everybody was from Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina. So I was always around people from down south. And I just tell you this quick story. When I interviewed at LSU, and one of the professors took me to the Shaquille O'Neal lounge where at Live Cook for breakfast, and they had a buffet, and I went and I got some grits, and the professor was shocked. He was like, "We don't get many Northerners down here who know about grits." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Grits are my favorite food. I was raised on grits. I was eating grits every day." So,
but now that you speak of grits, now here's the controversy between me and Smash. Now,
I hope you never start talking about sugar and salt.
You already know it. Where do you fall on the sugar?
I'm sorry, sugar does not belong.
It's gotta go. It's gotta go.
No.
Yes.
And if someone says they got their soul food restaurant or southern restaurant and they don't have grits on the menu, I'm not eating there.
See,
I don't even care if grits aren't good. You don't even have
sugar all day. Sugar all day.
Smash. This is a woman that's smarter than both of you and I, and she knows sugar don't go on grits.
I gotta go. I gotta have sugar. I can't eat it without sugar. I just can't.
One more thing before you go. What is your favorite Louisiana delicacy? What's your favorite go-to?
Oh, I like I don't even know what they call it, but it's I love catfish, and so I'm always gonna order catfish. But when they put the etouffee on top of it, that's just dangerous. And so that's probably my favorite. And then I just have to add my oldest son, when he goes to get a po' boy, and I give him a few dollars to do that, he always comes back with a side order of fried okra for me, and I'm just like, "You're killing me." I have to eat it.
Yeah,
so this is my favorite.
Well, we definitely thank you taking the time out.
I do have one.
Go ahead, man.
I do have one personal question though. Is there a way that I or anybody else that's listening and watching can take your course online?
So you know how you know about the university industrial complex. So you know the answer to that, but I'm happy to have conversations with anyone who's interested about, learning about particular areas that they're looking for resources, want to know books that they could read. I'm terrible about promoting my own books. I have now authored or edited over 25, and I tell folks that I'm happy to send them electronic versions of it, on a case-by-case basis. And so I can be supportive that way. And anyone who wants to can email me at drlorimartin@gmail.com. Just all one word, drlorimartin@gmail.com. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. And I counted 18. She said 25 plus. So I'm like, she's done a lot of writing. She's done a lot of writing. But I definitely thank you for taking your time out and helping our audience educate us a little bit about the sociology of and the way that we think, the way that we act. One of the reasons why we started this show was because to open that window up so others can see how we think and how we act, and not just the stereotypical things that they see in the mass media. So I definitely thank you for that. Smash, any closing words before we get up out of here?
Thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. You're a welcome guest, like I said, and no disrespect to any of our other guests, but you have been one of my favorite guests just by.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So just because I'm interested in the field that you're in, so it's just admiration from my end. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate all the love and hope we can maybe do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
No doubt.
So with that being said, much love, and we out.
Peace.
What a world, you now listening to Talka Brothas podcast.
Welcome to the Talka Brothas podcast.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Talka Brothas podcast.
Talka Brothas.
Talka Brothas podcast with Smash and Go D.
Go and Smash, you guys doing your
The
thing.
mic is contacted, I attract clientele.
My brother.
Go and Smash, Talka Brothas.
That's poppin'. We ain't worried about nothing.
Y'all are now listening to Talka Brothas podcast.